Nice.
I'd like to call the meeting of the Cincinnati Park. And I'll note that all of our commissioners are present with us this morning, as well as our director. So it's a beautiful day to be in Cincinnati Park. We're in Eden Park today, the sun's shining. We're going to start with public comments to us. We have 3 speakers today. First will be Michael Schroeder. Sorry for Michael Schroeder. Please come on up and address us, talking the subject of Jurgens Park Dog Park.
Yes, thank you. My name is Michael Schroeder.
Thank you.
Sitting back lives at 1629 South Argyle Place. I've been for almost 10 years now, and I've been in contact with Jenny Mosley about this idea that we are looking for direction of how to accomplish something. The idea here is to take the Jurgens Park, that is a corner of Hamilton and Bruce Avenue, and basically subdivide that almost in half. So, there 10 years now, a couple of our neighbors sure built that network. In that 10 years, love Northside. My wife works for Cincinnati. I work at a company on Ludlow. So we moved to Northside, which is closer to 3-mile commute. In those 10 years, we've gotten to know a lot of neighbors, really love the area. And when the pandemic hits, my wife working remotely. I worked remotely for a very short time and actually work. We were surviving all that and we took control in our house. So we, many other people in the country, got ourselves a dog. And with that, there's a lot of the responsibilities of letting the dog out a lot. And we have a very insignificant number. We did a lot of walking. And here at the park, this was in October of 2020. Started one in the fall. Very few people were using the park. We would go in there and go to the lots of other people were out walking their dogs. They would see us in there and they would say, "Hey, can you come in?" And that's really good. The dogs can eat each other. Dogs can eat each other. So in that time, we met a lot more people in Northside. And the idea started to come up. This park is central to a lot of people who have dogs, and there's no real good place for them. So I started to speed around and come up with this idea of basically in the park. Traditionally closed all the way down the same structure. Very secure. It would be very simple to subdivide it. The red line represents the fence locations in the plan that were cut almost exactly in half and create this dog market. There are other things in the park has some need of some improvements as well. The plant structure is upwards of 20 years old. There's benches in there that are running, and some of them are running benches now. And that is a shelter, this means a little above like it. It's still good. It's not. So this idea of looking for direction on what it takes to accomplish this, we're including Northside hardware company to get involved for any kind of maintenance. So they possibly. I've also been in contact with Dan Bryden with WA Directory. Company I work for, Trailside Design, is designing materials and play areas for children's museums and science. Last October, my company had bought my Playboard, which has 40 other outdoor play companies, including Trailside, which is structure in the park. And this is a large company called Dog Pot, which is the company that makes doggy cleanup bags and the distribution fee. So, actually, to have people go, I want to make sure I'm going in the right direction.
Well, I appreciate all of you coming in, and I think it's reflective of what we're hearing not only in Cincinnati but around the country. That one of the greatest amenities that citizens are longing for right now is dog parks, and we are actually also working with other neighborhoods and doing the same thing. So I think it's an excellent plan from so far what we see. Well, I think the best way to do this is to turn this over to our director. And I think the best way is, as you already started doing, engaging with Jenny Mobley. Steve can give you more direction on how this comes forward. Like other groups, they have done similar to what you're talking about here, talking about fundraising, getting community groups together, in showing interest or support for you. Mm-hmm. I think the same thing would happen here. And I think that's where if you can talk with and get on schedule with the director who might put you in touch, besides with Jenny, with our planning and design committee, planning and design department, sorry. But this is the type of thing we really do want to look. I think you'll see later in the agenda today, we are interested in doing things throughout the city in various neighborhoods. So this might be something that if we get together with the Northside Community Council, if these are the types of things that they would like to see done throughout the city parks, then that's something we appreciate, hearing the things that the community wants done. So I think that would be, I think this is a good first introduction to us. Mm-hmm. You know, I think the staff, the park board always wants to hear what it is that the community wants us to do. So this is perfect. This is exactly the way I appreciate you coming to the board. And then I'll just, if you make sure, I'll make sure that that Steve has your contact information. Okay. You might want to, your number's on here. So we'll have your phone number and your contact information, and we'll follow up with you on the next steps of how this will work. Okay. But again, I very much appreciate the time and energy that's already gone in, and appreciate you taking your time this morning to come into Cincinnati Parks, and I assure you, Steve and his staff will follow up with you. Great. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. If you got any other time for doing design work, Joel back there could use a little assistance. So Joel is our manager of planning and design. So thank you for your work. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we also have a couple speakers. Let's go with Joyce Miller. And Joyce wants to talk with us about green space in Mount Adams.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for helping us. We've come pretty far and we're kind of stuck, which is why we're here. There's a parcel of land that I want to talk about. It's the parcel of land that's next to the art club at the bottom of Paradrome, Martin Drive, and Parkside. It's a sort of gateway entry, you know, down there into Mount Adams, and it's always been green. In fact, the donation of that space to the parks was in the 1800s, and it was meant to always be open space. And then what happened about 22 years ago was there was this idea that the Cincinnati Public Schools would donate their Duvenet collection to the art club. And the art club would then raise the money to expand exponentially, you know, to hold the Duvenet collection. And in exchange for the parcel of land that is green space that I'm talking about, the park board got I think a parcel of land with Aiken High School. So there was this sort of land swap. But what ended up happening was the art club was unable to raise the funds. So they ended up with this parcel of land that they had to take care of and cut the grass and also pay taxes on. And they're a 501c3, they're a club. They don't have the money to do that. And so the taxes accumulated. Of course, the value of the land also rose. And then the Duvenet collection went to the Cincinnati Art Museum, which is a perfect place for it. As we all know, there was the exhibit at the Duvenet collection, you know, just a few months ago. So where are we? Well, what ended up happening was the art club needed to get rid of that land. Understandably, they just could not hold on to it and pay the money for the taxes. At a certain point, they wanted to pave the green space, understandably, no, because they don't have any parking. So we didn't want to see that happen. And many of us worked with Cincinnati Parks and the Cincinnati Parks Foundation to set up a fund, so which is what we have now, to raise the money to actually buy the green space from the art club. And then I also worked with City Council and the parks so that we'd raise the money and then we would purchase that land, and that land would then go back to the parks. All that's in place. That's all agreed to. It's perfectly acceptable to the city of Cincinnati. You know, the city will work with us. The parks already said, you know, I already have a letter that said, does that mean my time's up?
No.
Okay. The parks have already said that, yes, this will make this happen and we have our fund. So of the $182,000 that we need, we have raised $90,000. In the meantime, the Cincinnati Art Club needed to get rid of that land. And so they put it up for sale. So we fortunately had an angel donor came in and purchased that land, but that person can't continue to hold on to that land and accrue the tax bill. I mean, it's just not fair. So we are trying to raise, so the point where we're at after a year and a half of fundraising is, or rather a year of fundraising, Shane Paul's purchased the land for us a year ago. So we're sort of stuck. It's hard to get money for that space and also maintain it. You know, we've had neighbors, you've probably seen that characteristic white barn, you know, that's been there forever, where they used to sell produce. The guilds used to sell produce out of that barn. They had a horse and carriage that used to go through Mount Adams. But so I worked with Jan Michelle Lemon last year. She was trying to help us obtain stimulus money. So there are lots of avenues that we've been pursuing. I've also written to, it's called the Trust for Public Land. I've also written to Tom Jones, you know, to try to see, and also the Cincinnati Art Museum, Cameron Kitchen, to see if there's sort of some maybe arts connection project as an entry or gateway into Mount Adams. How can we work with the beautiful Tom Jones Commons that now draws tons of people to a space that really was not utilized the way it's being utilized now? The art museum and the steps and the gateway into Mount Adams. This is right next to an art club. The art club's even interested in working with us if we are able to get some sort of, art, some sculpture, outside sculpture piece. But we'd really like to have some direction right now. We're really concerned that.
So Joyce, what is your shortfall at this point?
Right now, we need 182,000 and we have 90.
So
We have 90.
Yes,
So
we
you're
do.
looking for basically a match to your individual.
Right,
fundraising. Okay.
right. Mhm.
And this is, the fund is at the Cincinnati Foundation.
That's correct, Parks Foundation. Mhm.
Yeah, as background, I'm very familiar with this. Shane Pauls is a personal friend of
Oh,
mine.
great,
and when
yeah.
he wanted to do this. He said, how do I do this?
Yeah.
How do I do this? And he came to me and said, this is something that the neighbors really want to do.
Mhm.
At that time, he had the right to buy it. He had
Yes.
secured that with the art organization that was there. And at that time, I did point him to the Parks Foundation, because that's the group
Yes.
that helps us and is handling things like this with the donors. So that is absolutely the right thing to do. And I'm thrilled that you've already raised $90,000.
Yes, we
towards
did.
this.
We've been working with Jennifer. Yes.
Tom Jones also has talked with me about this project. He would love to see it as you said, the gateway to Eden Park, because it is right there before you come into Eden
Right.
Park. So again, I very much appreciate you bringing this to us and raising the issue. In my mind, I would also, Mr. Pacelli here, our director, loves to have these meetings because he has a lot of things thrown his way. But what I would like to do is ask Steve also to work with you. Steve will meet also that collaborating with the Parks Foundation and with the Cincinnati Parks to see what we can do to help you. Because I think, as you have pointed out to us, protecting green space is something that's very important to the park board. And
Jim, I just have a question.
absolutely.
So you're looking for 100 grand, but you're also looking for someone who would accept this property and maintain it.
No, the city of Cincinnati will, the parks will take it back. It used to be park board. Yes. Yes, that's exactly
We
right.
have not, there's letters from, I believe Kara wrote them a letter
In
of
January.
support,
Yes,
for this project. We have not approved
Okay.
the
Right.
acceptance of this property yet. So at this point, it's clearly the donors who actually now own the property. I believe
That's correct, Shane.
Now,
Mhm.
an individual now owns the property. He wants to give it to the city of Cincinnati to go to parks.
that's right.
So that's the process that's going in. The city has already talked with him. There was discussion about surveys that may be required of the property.
That's right,
all of
engineering.
this. But initially, Shane and the community needed a way where they could have donors that would participate with the current owner to purchase that property and then give it to the city. And that's where the foundation came in and is working with them to establish a fund at the foundation to collect and hold
That's right.
donor money to then go towards donating the property to the city. That would then go to us. But we would, at some point in time, have to look into accepting the property. We have not seen, as Michael brought in, he brought in a nice, we have not gotten that yet for this property, but I would think that's the next step, would be to lay it out. It's a small corner triangle. Yes, it will take maintenance, mowing. I think what the initial discussions were with Kara and the staff was that since they're maintaining Tom Jones Commons, this is a block away. It would be speaking for the staff, it would be their, they would then, after mowing, Tom Jones Common is over, just mow the property. We have not seen that in Park Board yet, but that is where my understanding is Kara and the staff presented that letter to the current owner of support interested in having that property as park property.
Right. Yeah,
So-
so right now it's being maintained by volunteers. The barn owner, his sons cut the grass, Shane cuts the grass when he can, Bill Thompson cuts the grass, but we don't really have the equipment to cut that grass, so.
So that, I think, is the next step.
Yes.
To work with Steve and to collaborate with the foundation and with you all to determine how can we come up with the 90-some thousand. And
Yes,
then perhaps if more can be raised or more can be set aside as a continued fund with the Parks Foundation, that would then on an annual basis, anybody that loves that in Mount Adams and wants to maintain it, that could then be a source in the future to go towards maintenance.
yes, in fact, we do have donors who are interested in adding a fountain to the space, a bench to the space. There has to be a design, but and we have a sort of general design, a sort of sitting wall, but we need something much more comprehensive, as you say. And we have a committee, we have people who are willing to put the time into this, and so I'd be happy to.
That's perfect. We appreciate you
Thank
coming
you.
and talking with us, and we appreciate the volunteer work that you're doing
Thank you.
and your interest in green space. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
I have Bill Tom. Do you want to add anything, Bill?
Trace has said everything, much more calmly than I would have. 22 years ago, I came and spoke about this land swap. And it's been we've been, I don't want to say fighting it, we've been trying to find a solution for that space. And we have chased away multiple developers there. And it would be a shame at this point that happened. So thank you for your all reasonable reaction to this. And we think again, $90,000 is a lot of money. That's not a lot of money to keep development off, especially with Tom Jones. And we made friends with the guys who cut the grass around there. I haven't asked them to come across the street yet, but I'm out there pushing in 90-degree heat. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. And we will give this to the director, so he's got your information. But again, thank you to all of you who came out on a sunny day at Eden Park. I do also want to mention that we've had input from the community through email. We have received letters in support as well as letters in opposition to a potential dog park in Clifton. We have received letters in support of the project to improve the Potter's Field in the Rapid Run area. The troubling communication, at least for me, that we received this fund is another communication about items being thrown from Bellevue Park down onto Clifton Avenue and the apartments at the bottom of Bellevue Park. They said that the latest communication was that it's not only rocks, but now it's glass bottles being thrown. So if we could work with the police or however you think it's best, but Steve, you've got that contact information. Tia's got that information as well. I do think we need to figure out what we can do to address that safety issue. And then we also had a letter from a citizen about the arm letter fountain and spray ground down at Sawyer Point that is not in service at this point in time. And the citizen was requesting that we find the funds to repair and put the arm letter fountain and spray ground back in working service for the urban society, urban community.
Yes, President. do we have, in a case like that, do we have any information out on social media? Because I think one of the people talked about getting down with realizing that it was closed. So that we alert people when we have things that are offline, or like, I mean, when a restaurant goes out of business and it's a chain, and say, this location is closed, but you can go to this one. So informing people of alternatives, so they can go.
Typically, we'll have signage for the location, and we've got a page of the website that's dedicated to particular updates at all the parks. So the section's closed, this county's closed, etc. And we send it out on social media regularly, but there's usually a handful, so.
Before we get into the nitty-gritty work of the park board, I think I would like to move up the introduction of new staff. I know, Derek, you're here with a number of your new employees, and I would love to hear from them first.
So we have 4 new employees, well, not new employees, 2 promotions, 2 laborers that we they're transitioned from part-time to full-time employment. We got Kevin Manuel. Coming up, Kevin.
I'm Kevin Manuel. I've been with the park for 8 years, seasonal and full-time. And I've just been promoted to service crew leader on the west side. And I'm very excited about the opportunity. Thanks.
And how long have you been with Parks?
8 years, seasonal and
Thank you.
We also have Mike Brown.
How you doing?
Good.
I'm Mike, been with the city about 5 years. I was on the tree crew and then just transitioning to a new position.
You got a little sun this week. It's
Always.
sunny out there.
Always. This is from Chicago. Unfortunately, it was not cool there.
And so you've been with us for 5 years.
5 years. Yes.
Congratulations.
Well, good morning. I'm Ray Bishop. Started off as a seasonal last year. Just went full time. It's my 2nd year, and I love working.
Ray, if you have any friends that are looking for a job, Derek's name, but thank you very much. Good morning.
I'm Noah Trim. I've been here for a year as a seasonal, and this is my first week as a full-time laborer now. And yeah, I like the work.
Noah, you became a full-time when it's 100 degrees weather out.
It was a fantastic first week.
Yeah. Thank you. Great.
Also, just give a quick update on how we're filling up permanent positions. We have, since I've started, we probably filled about 13 full-time positions. We have about 3 to 4 that'll be onboarded within this next month. So we are moving pretty fast, considering since, Cincinnati time. I'll continue to give you guys updates. There's more to come. We hired some really good people. So thank you for giving us the opportunity.
Thank you, Derek, as we said last week. We definitely appreciate your contribution already to Cincinnati Parks. So thank you. If you could move, I think the rest of the.
Stay cool.
Yes, thank you, guys.
They have signs saying if you want to work for the parks.
Oh.
They seem to have all come down.
Wow.
At least the ones in our territory.
Well, before we get into the nitty gritty, and I'm sorry that they left, I think it's time that we celebrate Cincinnati Parks. We've got so much positive going on. We just met some great employees that are coming to work for us. if you step back and think about Cincinnati parks over the last few months, we were ranked the 4th in the nation compared to the 100 largest US cities in the United States by the Trust for Public Land. 4th in the nation, that's up from number 8 last year. And then USA Today named Smale Riverfront Park as the number 2 best river walk in the nation. That again is up from number 5. And then just recently, and Tia, if you could bring that up, just recently, the mayor and the city manager presented to the press the results of a survey that was done of the city of Cincinnati. And the purpose of the survey was to help the city strategically plan for the future as they continue to grow. The city of Cincinnati had satisfaction ratings of 3 major city services that were notably higher than the national averages. And I'm so thrilled to see that the number 1 was Cincinnati Parks and Recreation Programs and Facilities. And we scored in that survey 79.4% satisfaction rating of the citizens of Cincinnati. That's 28.8% higher than the national average. And it's just a great, great result to see that the citizens of Cincinnati greatly appreciate what's being good in the parks. And then if you look at a little bit closer look specifically at Parks and Recreation, how did people feel about Parks and Recreation? And you'll see that maintenance of our city parks received 80.1% satisfaction rating compared to other areas in the Parks and Recreation system. So why do I say this? I say it because we're doing great things in the parks. We're never satisfied. We want to be number 1. We'd love to see 100% satisfaction rating. But why I want to say it is that I want to recognize our staff. Cincinnati Parks can't have these types of recognition if it weren't for the staff that we have. We have such dedicated staff that go out and perform this work every single day. And I just want to make sure, and I'm sorry that Derek had left the meeting already, but I just want to say we appreciate all the work that the city staff, the park staff does for the city. Steve, you've got a great challenge here to maintain that team, maintain the momentum that we have. But we got a lot of positive things happening in Cincinnati Parks, and we can thank our staff for that. So thank you very much. So with that, we'll move into some nitty-gritty business that we have here. First of all is approval of minute meetings, and you'll see there are a number of meetings. I was initially going to ask Tia if she would read through all of those meeting minutes for us. But you'll have the regular meeting, our regular meeting back of May 19. I did have one small thing I'd like to change on there at the very end and after executive session on page 5, Tia, President Jim Getz made a motion except Mr. Steve Pasilla. I think we should be clear. I made a motion to appoint. So just change a couple words to appoint Mr. Steve Pasilla. But that's the only correction. Does anybody have and the other 4 meetings were special meetings that were called specifically for the special committee of recruiting and hiring our new director. Are there any changes or other corrections to any of the special meeting minutes or our meeting of May 19th?
Yes, on June 9th, very small item, if we could correct the spelling of Jennifer Eisminer's name. If you don't have that, I can get that.
Perfect. Any other changes, corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved in second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you, Tia. Another great job. With that, we will now move into action items. And Steve, if you want to lead us through these, I appreciate it.
I'm going to introduce Greg Sherman, who's familiar with the Hollister property sales. This is formalization of the 2 boards agreement on
structure of the sale. Good morning, commissioners. Back in October 2021 is when the board approved the sale of Hollister rec area. This property was owned by the park board but managed by CRC. The property sold for $1.5 million. There's also additional dollars provided to the park board for the loss of the trees. And during this sale, there was always an understanding between the CRC, since they were managing the property, and the park board that we would share some of the proceeds with CRC. The intent of the full proceeds of $1.5 million is for the rehabilitation, working with the community in Mount Auburn. Between the leadership, they agreed on $250,000 to go towards CRC for Mount Auburn, CRC building, or even other projects in tech. So with this, we're looking for park board commissioners to approve the reallocation from $1.5 million of $250,000 to CRC for Mount Auburn. Before any improvements do occur within Mount Auburn, the community will be involved in identifying what is needed.
Any questions for Craig on that?
I have one. I just mentioned it again, as I always do when this project comes up, the basketball court. And wanted to make sure in the communications that attention is paid to that, because that is an asset for the community that's going to be lost. And I understand that there is going to be effort to engage with the community to define where the next place is for that, so that the kids who are using it now can access it at the new location. So I just want to make sure that that doesn't get lost.
Trying to provide a little bit of an update there. So there are 2 or 3 locations within the park that we feel would work for basketball court. The park board will be engagement, recreation, providing some overlays of basketball courts in the park. That will be the information that we share with the community to determine which is the best location overall. The parks will lead that engagement. CRC will provide the engineering for the site. Basketball court, the park board will be able to construct. So that is our efforts moving forward to ensure the user has options.
So we're not counting on CRC to move that forward, really. It remains with us.
Communication will bring us a project. CRC will provide.
That wasn't what I was thinking. The direction this was going to go when we last talked about it, but that's good. I think the point is that basketball courts are critical, and when we remove them, we've got to replace them.
Exactly. And one of the things I recall as we talked about this originally, there was a significant amount of community engagement, particularly with the community council, and there was absolutely no opposition to this project moving forward. So that's really encouraging. The thing I remember at the time was the kids who use that basketball court are probably not going to community council meetings. So figuring out a way of getting input from the kids, as we did when we were doing Inwood Park, getting input from the kids so we can be responsive to them as best we can.
One of the things we've had success with is putting mobile kiosks at the locations of the construction site. It's just providing an overview of what they're trying to do. There's some cards there that you fill out, drop them in a little slot. We want to do something that the park board like that.
I think that would be a good idea. So we can hear from the people who are using it, make sure we're addressing them as best we can.
I have a very naive question. Why can't we just leave the basketball court that's in existence? Why does that have to change?
It's in the property we sold. It's in the property that we sold.
Okay, all right.
So
And
this
it's
I didn't quite
already
understand
been, it's not in function today.
Okay, yeah, gotcha.
It's already.
I told you it was naive.
for abundance of clarity here, we are talking about the park board leaving the planning for basketball court relocation within Inwood Park. And that'll get to, I'm jumping ahead, but I would like to talk about this today and the priorities. I know that the the budget has allocated some funding for the Inwood Park Pavilion. I'm just wondering if we shouldn't ask the director's office and staff to come up with a broader plan that has us considering the use of these funds to address the basketball court, to address the pavilion renovation, and just to more broadly look at Inwood Park so that we're not sort of piecing this thing together and really can think of a master approach to this park, very critical park.
Sure. So Joel and I had some initial conversation. I think he has kind of a master plan in his mind, but our goal next is to get it on paper for the entire plan.
Okay, great.
We've had conversations already about that.
Molly, I know I think there's 1.5 allocated in the 23 budget via the city plus another essentially 1.5.
You can get anything done you want with that, right?
I don't know how much of the pavilion we're gonna be able to do with that money, but like
Right.
Steve said, the first step of this, there's two things we know for sure that need to be done to ensure the viability of Inwood moving forward, and that's sustainability of the retaining walls next to the pavilion and around the park itself. That's one thing we know is a critical path item, and the other one would potentially be to use part of that money to provide a master plan for the remaining, whatever it is, $2.8 million after that stuff is done, just so we can comprehensively look at the whole park and know how to address it exactly like what you're talking about. So
Great.
we're getting
That's
there.
perfect. I think that's perfectly in line with what we'll talk about a little later. So thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Also,
So if-
they're leading, CRC's leading the engineering on the basketball court, but we will, P&D will be overseeing how that's put into the master plan and how that's all incorporated into the building rehabilitation stuff as well.
Perfect. Great.
I would also just, I'm sorry, add that Joel and I have been talking as well about, for especially the larger projects that are under construction, is a normal course of business, having signage at the site that shows what it's going to be, explaining what's coming, pardon our dust kind of thing, because we do get a lot of questions. It's been done hit or miss in the past, but we're going to try and make it more standardized. And so I
That's
think
perfect.
adding, a feedback to that is a great suggestion, whether that be electronic or via a card. So that's a good suggestion.
Great.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions though on this where we had agreed with CRC that 250,000 of the proceeds would go to them since they were managing that basketball court as well as the tennis courts that had been there previously? Any other questions on that? If not, do I have a motion?
So moved.
So we have a motion and a second. And all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Perfect. Thank you, Craig.
Commissioners.
Now, Joel, are you going to present to us Lytle Park Funds Certified?
Yes, sir. Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
Good to see you all. Yes, this one, as you know, Lytle Park is getting a major renovation this year. Just as an update on that, it'll come in my second part of this, but I might as well talk about it now. We got 2 bids yesterday for Lytle Park. I have not seen those yet. DEI is still certifying that those folks made their inclusion goals for everything. And as soon as they have certified that, I should see the bids probably tomorrow from what purchasing is telling me. So we did receive responsible bids at least on Lytle. Whether they made the DEI cutoff or they've included everything in the alternates, I haven't got to see yet. So just so you know, we do have positive bids on Lytle ahead of the shutdown. This ask is coming in conjunction with that project. This is to rehabilitate the adjacent playground, which was not included in that base bid. We know that we have a term contract with a provider that can do this, and that person may likely also be doing the main part of Lytle renovation. It's very likely that that will be the same contractor. So that works in our favor as well from a mobilization standpoint. We're asking that Parks allows us to reassign a TBD fund of $125,000, which was allocated in the budget, but not specifically for a park, to let us do Lytle Park playground in conjunction with this construction. The reason we're wanting to push this right now is because we don't want any overlap in construction. We don't want, putting on new turf and new bocce ball courts to go in and fix this playground 3 years from now. We'll also receive some savings in mobilization costs. Like I said, the same contractors doing both work, and it'll give us about a year. Preliminarily, we have set this schedule for Lytle construction to be done by fireworks next year. So Labor Day weekend next year. That's new information, but that's how the bid is written pretty much. So we're trying to get both of these things done in conjunction with that, and we're recommending that the board approve the use of $125,000 in funds for that purpose. We think we're gonna spend 100, but we're asking for a little more just in case.
Joel, I have a question there. Maybe it's a different scale, but this was I think, similar to what we spent on the Burnett Woods playground and also the Mount Echo playground.
Yep,
Are they comparable projects or?
Absolutely.
They are.
yeah, we will
I'm
probably be resurfacing the whole thing for sure. I know there's some curbing issues out there that are gonna be addressed from an infrastructure standpoint with this, and new equitable equipment. I'm very big on disability and making sure that everyone is included from that standpoint. So that's not the only thing, but we are certainly trying to include some accessible pieces in this playground as well.
Well, the good news that I wanted to point out here, if the scope was similar, is that you're not seeing prices for these playgrounds double or triple, which
That's-
is
yes,
what we're
ma'am.
seeing in a lot of other areas, so.
That's a great point, Molly. Yeah, we think we're gonna be fine with that. We talked preliminarily with some vendors, got some catalogs for some different kind of equipment, very much in keeping with some of our other parks, same vendors for most of these things. We're in agreement that we think we can do it, but we don't want to get to the point where we're at $102,000 and need to go back for a change order and stall construction for 3 months. That's why we're asking just for a little bit of contingency on that.
Great.
And this is designed with accessibility in mind as well.
Yes, ma'am. And inclusion. So we know that's a diverse neighborhood. You've got, the hotel around and several different businesses that are adjacent to that. You also get lots of families that come through Lattle Park. We're trying to accommodate everybody, make sure it's equitable for both groups of folks that we know use that park often.
It's not ever really catered to kids or families, so I'm excited to see that being incorporated into this park. It's great.
Yeah, that's all I have.
Great. Any other questions for Joel on this? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Move in second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you, Joel. Super. I'll introduce the next topic, the short-term strategic priority plan. It's been a couple years since we've had an annual business plan or specific priorities established for the parks. Director Kish did develop a list of priority projects back in March of last year in 2021, but no formal plan was ever finalized at that point in time. And a full strategic plan process, as we all know, was initiated by the director in the fall of 2021. But the early work in that the staff had worked on was never brought to the board. So as we're looking at annual budgets should be constructed to reflect and support established priorities of the parks. So park staff is currently working on putting together final plans for the 2023 budgets, including the allocation of the proposed city budget, as well as the commissioner's fund budget that we look at every year. Craig intends to present this combined budget to us in July. So this exercise that I'm proposing here, or the exercise of identifying short-term goals, is typically led by the parks director in concert with us, but it's typically led by the parks director. But given the current period of leadership transition, I think it becomes critical that the board take the lead in establishing the initial priorities for fiscal year 2023 and for the short term. This is going to facilitate budget development that Craig and the staff are working on today. The document that I gave to you today establishes those priorities that we will talk about. It's a draft. It's marked as a draft. Since we can't discuss these in advance of an open meeting, all of this has to be discussed in an open meeting, and that's why we're doing it today. The intent of the board, obviously, will be to assist Director Pasilla as he's moving into this role and establishing his work plans and business plan for the year. And then also as we bring on a new director, that we support them and give them some direction as to what are our priorities for the board. But we also recognize that their input and their insights may lead to modifications and reestablishing of these priorities as they get involved with staff and start developing priorities as well. That this will come back to us. This is a living, breathing document, but it needs to establish the priorities up front. And then over the course of the year, we can always modify an upgrade based on the input of Mr. Priscilla and the full staff that he's working with. And then as we bring on the new director as well. The board, once we do this, we really should on a at least a quarterly basis, put this on a public meeting agenda item so that we're constantly looking at assessing how are we doing? How are we doing against what we've set out to do? And then also to articulate if there's any changes in this strategic plan. So with that, what I've got, what I circulated to you was a start for this discussion. I think what you'll see that it's titled a short-term strategic priority plan. We recognize all of these things on this plan can't be done and won't be done in fiscal year 2023. But as we establish budgets, as Mr. Pacelli gets in and starts working at operational plans, it's a roadmap for him to say, okay, these are the areas that the park board wants to focus on. So that was the intent of this process. And before we get into the nitty gritty, is there any questions or comments on the approach to this?
I do have a comment, and you know I have a comment.
Yeah.
So first of all, I just want to say, Jim, thank you for doing this. I mean, this is something we've been calling for, and to have 2 sheets of paper that really help us stay centered on all of the things that get presented to this board is really helpful and valuable. Something interesting we've heard from all of the candidates that have come into this role, we've asked a standard set of questions, and 7 of 8 of them have said the first thing we need to do is either redevelop or revisit our master plan, which is fairly dated, and then from there develop a strategy to execute. And there's some merit to that. For us to step back and say, what do we as a park board identify as the most important things for us to do short-term and long-term, which is different than I think what we're dealing with right now, which is mostly a reactionary list of priorities that either have come from priorities that have been set by administration through identifying funding or response to some very engaged community players that have elevated their projects for our attention. And a lot of that is here. I don't know the answer to the question I pose, but how are we going to direct our priorities on staff for dealing with all of this, and also stepping back and saying, how do we want to connect, trails through Lagoida Woods and whatever the case may be. When we step back and say more proactively, what do we want to accomplish in these parks over the next 20 years? I use this as an example. How many dog parks do we want to have in the city? How will we go about identifying where these dog parks are located? As we know, some people want a dog park, some people don't want a dog park. So I just step back, I'm concerned about resources to address 15 priorities. It's hard to say, because in here there are really like 40 priorities. And also be able to step back and take a more proactive approach to longer term planning. I want to be sure we're setting up the next director for success, and also the staff for success, and not overloading them with so much to do. Some of these things we may need to say, great project, we can't look at that right now. We just can't. Again, I don't have the answer to this question, but it is something I would like to broadly discuss.
So are you proposing that we don't identify at this point some of the strategic things that we would like to put on the
That was
table?
not anywhere in the proposal.
That's why I'm just wondering.
Yeah, no. It may be that we say, let's pull some things off of here. What's the timeline for the short-term priority plan? Are we gonna ask the staff to set our expectations on what can be accomplished with this priority plan in the next 12 months? Because a lot of these are open-ended. I just want to set everybody up for shared expectations of success.
Yeah.
That's it.
Absolutely. That's why it was clear when I said that this is definitely not something that we would expect is to be finished. That's why it doesn't say fiscal year 2023 strategic priority plans. I think we owe it to staff. I think we owe it to the new director interim. And then as a new director comes in, because you're absolutely right. We've heard that we do need to do a master plan, and this is not master plan. To your point, how many dog parks do we want in the city? That is clearly a master plan. But as we're looking at today, as we're pulling together budgets, how are we going to spend the money that has either been allocated for the coming year or that's sitting in our coffers? What is our goal for deploying those dollars? And I would say that this is not reactionary. I mean, there are some where we have restated things that we have talked about. But when we say in this plan that we develop a plan to allocate capital resources that will touch all the city, that is an intentional goal and strategy that I think we are setting here, that the park board really never has set, that we're going to be setting a strategic plan that we want to be intentional with touching the various neighborhoods in the city. That's not reactionary. That's looking forward. The same way here with focusing on improvements and maintenance of existing walking trails in all parks. That does exactly what you're saying, that we should give the vision that we like trails, we like walking trails, so that staff knows as they're putting plans together, as they're going to propose back to us how to spend the money that's been allocated. For us, I think that is a forward-looking statement that we want to look at trails. One of the things that came out of the survey that the mayor presented was that the number one thing that people were interested in was walking and biking trails in the city.
I agree.
So this is not reactionary. This is being more proactive in saying the community wants this. Let's make sure that we've got this on our list, that we know and recognize that that's a priority for the parks.
Okay, let me back up my statements because it wasn't to be critical. I started out with compliments and thanks for putting this together. I think it's great and it's important. What I want, let me summarize my takeaway by being, I think a step involved here would be for staff to come back and establish our expectations for these items. Because you're right, there isn't a conclusiveness to many of these, and I think establishing expectations on what we should expect in the next 12 months in each of these areas will be important to creating a successful relationship between staff and board.
Yeah, and I'm encouraged. That's as Joel is going to come and present to us.
Yes.
I think with
he's covering a lot of this.
He's already started doing this, so I am thrilled that I think we are agreeing that we're not looking to appear established, and we're not communicating expectations that everything on this list is something that needs to be completed, but we're thrilled that staff will come back. And I agree, putting a timetable on it, that's part of the whole thing of asking them to come plan. Steve?
Yeah, the good news is we've got so much work to do. We've got plenty to do. So
Yes.
this prioritizes really helps us. That's what we're trying to do. Joel is working on some larger projects next to the 6-year capital plan that really lays the foundation of our assets, life cycles. And then we can kind of determine our funding sources and what those extra amenities or extra assets that we want to add and where they fit in the overall plan. So I think Joel's done a great job of understanding the priorities that you have right now. They're all on our radar as well. They're hot topics that we're trying to address. Tia's done a great job of already creating a tracking mechanism for all of these projects already. We'll present that to the board, and you can shuffle those priorities with our staff to determine what's the best approach for these in the short term as we roll out to a longer term plan that again centers around the 6-year capital plan and the project tracking that Joel will hopefully share with us next month. We're really excited about the work that he's done. So we are looking at this comprehensively. Staff has had input, and we're looking to work with the board to determine what is that actual priority moving forward.
Jim, I do like that you added staffing in the planning department as number one.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Because clearly in order to do all this, you're gonna need a more built out team than you've got. So when you do set the expectations for us on where we should be expecting these things to be in the next 12 months. Make sure it doesn't include you, yourself, and your team working yourselves to death. Because as you say, there's no end to what needs to be done.
And I really appreciate you saying that, because the staff is too small to accomplish all the things that we want. We hope to have 2 co-op positions filled within the next 5 to 6 weeks. We've added those to our table organization. Joel has an extensive experience of working with co-ops. They can really push out the work. Some of the work that Joel's getting bogged down on, these co-ops can really help us be more efficient with our hours.
That's great.
And that's exactly why, that's what this is intended to do. We've talked a long time about needing to shore up that department, and anything that we're doing in parks seems to go through Joel and his department. So it's not unintentional, but that was the number one thing on my list here, was that we recognize, and we just set down number one in our priorities. All of these are not prioritized, but that one is. That one was intentional, that we say, and we're clear to the director, to Derek as he's looking at it, and you've heard these things from us. So it's just already putting down in writing what we have said. So that's a purpose there.
Jim, I have another question for you. I'm sorry, there's a lot of meat on this stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
There really is. On item number 10, the Parks Foundation collaboration for these 5 parks, how are those developed?
Those were developed, again, I took that from Cindy Frank's March 17 presentation to us, where she said, these are the urgent facility needs that would prevent us from closing amenities in our parks. These were Cindy laid out for us in I don't know how many page with pictures and everything. These are taken straight from her outline to us, where she said things like the Alt Park Cascade was number 1 on hers, and it's a $2 million price tag.
Wow.
So as we've talked with the Park Foundation, and they've said, give us your priorities, help us know what it is that we can help you with. These are clearly the types of things where they could help us with. And that's why all of those, the Alt Park Cascade, the Fairview Park retaining wall was on here, Bellevue Park Pavilion is on here. These are all the Eden Park Mellon Arch Bridge retaining walls. Some of the things I'm not even sure what the full extent are, but things like the Alms Park Pavilion that's on here, she indicated could be a $500,000 project. The Alt Park Museum Drive retaining walls are another one that she had on here. So that was just an indication of the types of things, and I think that is where I took them was from hers. The Mellon Arch Bridge retaining walls, she said could cost us between $1.2 and $1.4 million just for those retaining walls. So the reason, number 10, was recognizing that we're going to need some help on these significant projects. And that's where we need to identify things like that for the foundation, that there's some big projects that we just don't have the funding to do all of those things. So that's where those came from, straight from her outline of things that future park amenity closures. That was the red flag for me in that.
So I could be wrong about this, but my guess is that retaining walls will be hard to fundraise for, because they don't exactly bring people joy, even though they're probably the most
right
important things that are on the list that Cindy proposed to us.
Yeah. I think that's why we need to work with the foundation to say, is there a program where it cannot be labeled just as a retaining wall, but save our parks or rebuild park infrastructure. So it is something that is more appealing than, hey, give us money to plug a retaining wall hole, that sort of thing. So it's clearly not easier. We would have done it by now, I'm sure.
Well, maybe we can roll this out to be something a little more broad of collaborating with them on large projects, meaning, I know they've talked in the past about, there are certain things that get donors excited. Like, we've talked about, wouldn't a marathon trail in Mount Airy be something exceptional? And when I mentioned that to people on the Parks Foundation, they're like, oh yeah, that would be something that would get runners involved and just, maybe this is more of a master plan discussion about how we can get on the same page with them on a handful of high impact, high value projects that really excite the donor community.
Mr. President, first of all, let me say thank you also. When I look at this, I think it's the first time I've seen just a listing of the things that we are focusing on at any given time. So I can have one page to say, here are the important projects that we're working on. A couple of things that just I was having difficulty with as I was trying to categorize it and think about it in my mind. The first one was some of these things seem like administrative priorities, separate from things we want to get done in our parks. So I kind of think about those differently. Like the first page where it says fiscal year 2023 priorities, and the list of things here sound like administrative priorities. These things are the kinds of things we need to put in place so that we can get the work done we want to get done. And I added a number 7 here, a strategy to address our maintenance outages or our delayed maintenance or whatever the words are we're calling those. But I think some of those show up in number 10 on the next page. So I was just trying to organize this in a way in my mind that I could carry it with me. And the discussion that you and Commissioner North were just having about the foundation seemed more like a how. Once we define what the priority is, then the question is, how do we get it done? And some of these will mean engaging with the foundation, with the how of getting it done. What are the resources that we're going to need to get it done? What is the budget that we're going to need to get it done? And is this one we want to engage with the foundation on? To Molly's point, what are the ones that are going to be ones that we want to serve up as potential items that we want to work with the foundation? If those are not, if there are things on that list that are not, then what is the source? Because I have something. What is the source of funding for that particular project? For those things that are just, we've got to do these, but they are not sexy and glamorous. Nobody's gonna put their name on a retaining wall and say donated by, probably.
Depends on the visibility.
With spray paint.
Maybe we can do it such that
A construction company might like to do
maybe
that.
so, and that's the creative part of it.
Yeah.
But I think separating these out into things that are internal that enable us to get things done, and then what are the things we're going to get done, and then the how of doing that. And of course, timing flows from that. But I think this is a great start. I really do.
I agree.
Would it be helpful if on our tracking mechanisms, we have funding sources?
Oh, absolutely.
So you'll want to see what that's.
Oh, yeah.
And with the retaining walls and things like that, non-sexy items, there could be some grant opportunities. For things like that.
Yes.
We just don't normally look into, because again, they're not this fun. So we're trying to expand a division right now to kind of look for those opportunities, utilizing staff expertise as well. And maybe that's our funding source for those hard to raise money for items.
And the other one is, we've got 15 items. What are the principles we are going to put in place to define how we end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, what the real priorities and order are? Because I think the whole idea about, and I really love this one, being equitable across our park system is very important. And that's kind of a principle I think we ought to operate against. So that's not a priority to me. That's how we're going to do business. And it's not about spending the same amount of money in every park. That's not it. It's about a quality standard that we decide is critical, and below this is unacceptable if we're going to have a park sign on that piece of property. So it's, we start there and then we look at how do we spend such that we accomplish that across our park system.
Well said.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And that should probably, guide the foundation as well to what our needs are and work from that perspective.
Absolutely. I think the clearer we can be here, and I really appreciate you doing this, it's going to serve us well on all kind of levels in our communications with the foundation and saying, these are the things we are looking to do. How can we engage with you to make these happen? And then looking at other sources and then communicating to the community so they know what to expect. And we can set goals that are clear, then people can hold us accountable.
That's what we're working toward. Thank you.
Great.
I make an assumption that this draft will be in our minutes.
Yes,
And so therefore, city council would have a copy
yes,
of this.
yes,
Yes,
yes.
that's problematic in some respects, but good in other respects.
Well, the fact
We don't want to give city council any excuse because we've got this foundation and a list of things that we're looking to the foundation to take care of, to give us less money.
Yeah.
But they do need to have, I think, in their hot little hands, a strategic plan from us.
A
That
couple
gives them
things.
direction.
Absolutely. Number one, unfortunately, anytime we send anything to anybody, it's already a public document. So this
Yeah.
already is a public document. Number two, I think that fits really into like number two, that they do need, the city council does need to understand that we've got to relocate our Reading Road Operations Department. That is a given, and it's not because we chose to sell that property. It's because the federal government wants our property. So it does show there, and that's why I think it's important for us today. And that's why I think it's a priority for the short-term priority for the staff, is that we need to have a final plan, including timeline and funding sources needed to complete this. If we need another $2 million to be able to find a place for our staff, we need to be very intentional in saying, we've got to have this money. And in fact, we've all received emails about this, that there's potential budget surplus that will be addressed at the end of any budget period, or there is additional capital availability potentially through the city. So I think it's important for us to say as a priority to you guys, get this plan together, because we need to be ready to go and say to the city council, hey, don't forget, we need $2 million since we have to be out of that building next spring. So that's the type of thing where, yeah, I understand your point, but we've also, I think it's good for council to know that there's some things and there's some large ticket items that we're thinking about as a board. We've identified that's a priority, that we have a place for our staff to work. That's a priority. And I think that's why it's important for council to see this as well.
I want to underscore one thing you have written here, Jen, which is on number 8. That this section here is about evaluating a plan of action for things we have considered, but not an endorsement that we are actually going to undertake these projects. So
Correct.
I'm underscoring
Absolutely.
what you have said here for emphasis of the point.
Thank you. Exactly. And this is all of number 8. I think it starts off where we ask that we develop a plan. It's not, we're going to set the plan here.
That's right.
That's not for us to do. You guys, Joel sleeps at night thinking about these things, I'm sure, but to at least put a priority that we start developing a plan, which you've already started. We know that. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Molly. And I think it's important that also from a forward-looking standpoint, and it's similar to what the city has said. The city knows that we've got backlogs in capital need, in parks, in recreation, in public services, but they can't commit 100% of their capital to be able to address that. the council is doing what I think we need to do, and that's where, yes, we need to spend money to do the maintenance and repair that's needed to keep these parks safe and operating. But then also that we do need to address the long-term strategic and infrastructure needs that we have. But just like the city has said, we can't spend 100% of our money on fixing the past. We also have to make sure that we have a vibrant city here, that we're investing in things that keep this city vibrant. I think it's the same way with Cincinnati Parks. We have to continue look towards how do we continue to meet? How do we meet if we've got the citizens who are supporting us? How do we keep our parks vibrant? How do we keep them to be the #4 park in the country and working towards a #1 park system? We've got to spend some of our budget on things that aren't just fixing what is broken. And that is something that I think this does lay out very clearly, that from a strategy for this park board, we are thinking about all three, making them safe today, doing what absolutely has to, having a plan in place for how we address and how we systematically are going to address this need that we have for infrastructure. And then how do we allocate money to keep our parks vibrant and welcoming to the citizens? Any other comments? Again, this is the only time we can talk about these things. So this is, I have no pride of wording. I'm glad to bring this forward, but I welcome any other input.
I really appreciate you doing this, Jim, because you manage a barrage of topics, and to have this put on 2 sheets of paper is really valuable. So thank you.
Absolutely. And
I have a question for Joel, okay?
Absolutely.
In reading what you're going to talk about, at any rate, I assume that you're going through that whole. Yes, right. And maybe looking at some of the things stated there and would make a list of what you think we don't need anymore. They're no longer viable.
I can, well, Steve alluded to a tool that I'm making, and I'll get into it for sure when it's my piece, but yes, that tool is going to be a list. The first part of that list is the current projects, everything that you guys have seen on that 150 page, 150 project list that you're talking about. Well, we're going to take it a couple steps farther and make sure we know what year that stuff is supposed to be funded in. That's fiscal year 21, which still has some money in it, 22 and 23. Those will be the active list that you all have already approved for moving forward. While we're doing that at the same time, Steve has hooked me up with Dan Jones and showed me a few things about how CRC does some of their capital improvement planning and how that breakdown looks in comparison to how Parks does things. So we're going to take it a step farther and be tracking using the Brand Center Care Report along with many other factors, including staff. Our staff that works in these parks know them better than anybody. They know that they can fix, or they know what problems are available, and I listen to them to add projects to that list. So the bottom 200 projects that aren't already approved by you all will be things for discussion over the next year to 2 years. You'll see them very, very shortly. We'll synthesize that Brand Center Care Report and add those in. But the very last comment on these Excel sheet that you all will have access to will be my comments. And sometimes they're going to be as simple as, should this be a project? How did this start? Where are we going? How does this fit our mission? So giving you all the tools and even knowing what projects are supposed to be coming will, in my opinion, will help you guys make more timely decisions and keep us on a path to be moving forward in the right direction. So, but you have to have that information to be able to make those decisions, which I feel hasn't been presented lately.
2 things. One is, my first comment about, I think these are administrative and these are things to get done. No, I've read this many times. I missed, you had the headers there. These are board, these are direct. So my miss. And I have my glasses on too. So the other question is, where do we go from here? What do we do next with this?
And Steve, I mean,
we've taken the priority list that you provided, we shared it with staff. What I've asked staff to do is kind of give their own version of where they think we should prioritize these projects. And then we're gonna start tracking them, and try to figure out what's that low-hanging fruit, which ones can we attack easier than the other ones. But we're gonna be coming back with feedback from staff and asking for your input as well as we prioritize those individual projects. And you'll see on the first report that we give you, some of this stuff is already in movement. Some of it's already going the direction that we want it to. So I think the next step is to show you what we believe the priorities are, what we believe the timing could be for these projects, and for you to reshuffle it or have a discussion about reshuffling. So we're all kind of rowing in the same direction.
And any additional things that come to their mind that
Yes.
have not been covered here.
Yes.
And then set our expectations. It's very easy for us to pop in for a few hours every month and be like, well, what's going on?
Yeah.
So set our expectations on where this will be in at what period of time.
Yeah, we're trying to save that pain point for both staff and the board.
Right.
Every 30 days to hear the same message from staff is not good for us or for you. And so we'll give you some real expectations based on capacity of Joel staff, based on the funding source, and really lay out what we think is a reasonable time to finish that project. And as a general rule, we're going to go toward putting some time in there. So we'd rather provide you good news than bad news.
And along the lines of Linda too, some of these, there are a lot that deal with projects, but some of the other ones that we've talked about, like the hiring of staff. I also, we've got number 4 here, develop an employee communication plan. This plan is to address the board's and park leadership's commitment to ongoing communication with staff. That's intentional. Linda and I have spent some time, and all of us have interacted with staff to know that they want to know what's going on. They want to know that they are going to have communication. And I know, Steve, you've already got ideas on how to accomplish that.
I'm going to cover that in my comments later.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. And the only other thing I'll mention, like some at the bottom there, develop contracts for invasive plant removal in Mount Airy, Leboito, and Stanberry. Just so you know, those came directly from staff. I spoke with the 2 gentlemen that were here presenting from the land management group that we're talking about in Spaces. I just said to them, if you had $1 million that was handed to you, what are the priorities? Where do you see, as the ones that are walking these 62 miles of trails, where do you see the priorities at? Where would we put this? So again, these are not things that I just came up with and thought about. I did get some input from staff, but that's the sort of thing where next steps would be for the staff to look at all of these and for Steve to come back. All we're doing is saying to Steve, here's our thoughts. Now, you're the director, working with staff. How do we do this?
I really like number 10 too, because I remember the presentation on, here are the things we need to focus on, we need to think about, or we're going to be looking at taking some of these assets out of service.
Yeah.
So I think those are important.
And I don't want to go through each one, but like the rollout of the signage throughout our system, I think we continue to think that's going to be so positive for everybody, for our trails, that we're just, and in the last one, I'll just mention the last one as well, the biochar project. I think we all feel like that is a great project. So it's another one of those where I think we put it on here so we tell staff, keep it in mind. So again, going back as we talked about with the relocation of the Reading Road Operations Center, perhaps this is another project where if there is budget surplus or if there is additional capital funding available, that City Council is aware that this is something we all like. This is something that may be worthy of them looking at, and as Steve's had other conversations with other potential funding sources for this. So it just lays out, this is something we like. This is something we would see as priority. So anything else? From my perspective, I would like to adopt this if there's knowing it's a working document, but something that we can clearly say as a park board, this is our first go in our initial priority setting. So Do I have a motion to adopt?
Move to accept that as a working document.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. I think I appreciate your support.
We appreciate it, Jim.
Yes, absolutely, appreciate it. So in order to set expectations, in terms of next steps, are we gonna hear about this monthly with an update as this gets refined and then added to it, things like funding and timing and all of that?
And the goals are updated for every week.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, our next business is, we've looked forward to this for a long time, Joel. Thank you for being here. Yeah, no pressure, but the floor is yours. Sit there, and if we can move this over there, I want everybody to make sure they hear what you're saying to us. It's exciting stuff.
Good morning, commissioners.
Morning.
They say to start with a joke. So my joke for today is, I told Jenny Mobley on my second day that I would have everything that you just talked about synthesized in about 3 days. Oh, you got 150 projects on this list, right? I'll have it all figured out in 3 days. That was my naivete when it's coming into this. That was a joke. Okay, so I won't go through and read this whole memo that I prepared, but I do want to point out some things and show you all how I went about even starting essentially in parallel with what you guys are talking about today. In assuming command, I guess, of the division of planning and design, I asked myself first, what is the mission? And the first place I went was to the code. What does it say in the code about the parks and what our mission is? You know, you all know this, but the mission of the park board is to conserve, manage, sustain, and enhance the park's natural and cultural resources and public green space for the enjoyment, enlightenment, and enrichment of all citizens in the Cincinnati community. To me, that's as simple as it gets, but it's very powerful in what it says. So I took the 4 words out of that: conserve, manage, sustain, and enhance. And that is my matrix for how I will help prioritize these projects from a simply planning and design standpoint, politics aside, conversations aside that I don't know. Prioritizing the things with those 4 things is my first guiding principle. Just a little bit, and I know you guys have read this and seen this, but just what I mean by each one of those. Conserve is kind of preserve to me. We have lots of architectural structures that can't be replaced. Preserving some of those and prioritizing the preservation of those, no matter how expensive they are. Alt Park fountains, I know that's a $2 or $3 million endeavor. Just knowing and conserving things that cannot be replaced is one thing. Manage is the second one. That's the one I've spent the most time on here. My dad always told me, you don't know what you don't know, and that's what gives you anxiety. So that, for me, like Molly said, staying up at night, not knowing everything that goes into what makes this place tick is what has kept me very, very vigilant in the past couple months since I've been here. We're working very, very hard in planning and design to get our arms around everything, every project that there is. Like you said, Jim, you've said it many times, there's 123 projects on the list when I walked in the door. That list is more like 400 now, including all the fiscal year 24 and 25 stuff we're working to plan towards, things that we're hearing about from other folks. Some of them are small and maintenance issues, but all things that need to be addressed by the board. So, yep. Sustain, one of you all mentioned it, I believe Jim mentioned it. Sustain to me meant giving our staff and our parks the ability to serve. Keeping our staff happy and motivated is a big part of what we do. District 5, the building, as you guys know, NIOSH bought it out. They have till April to get out next year. Making that a priority project because it keeps our staff happy, working, and their well-being at the first and foremost is a huge priority. So that's what I meant by sustain there. And enhance, make them better. Activate parks that aren't, equitable distribution. Linda, I appreciate what you said earlier about it's not a financial, you're not trying to make every park financially the same, but you are trying to set a standard and a level of expectation for how Cincinnati parks should look, act, and feel every single time. Equitable distribution doesn't always mean just money. All of our parks are not supposed to be equal. But they all should have a standard of care the same. And that's what I took from what you said earlier. So using those 4 principles, I also kind of looked at where can we improve? in planning and design. What are the issues that I see after 2 months here and things that maybe can be done a little bit better? And I picked out 4 major things. Project documentation. We have 150 projects. If you come on our server, you won't find 25 of them in any random order. Getting all of that organization internally down and set so that we have exactly where every document, every MOU, every easement, everything that we have should go is #1 priority. I've had a file structure since I was 20 years old, and this has to happen so that the information is at our fingertips. There's no excuse not to have everything in that building at your fingertips with the technology that we already have. Communication, you guys have harped on it many, many times. That's the most important thing that I've done since I've been here so far. 2 months, I've listened to everybody in this department, every public figure that I've met, every person in the community that I've met, listening and trying to gain a perspective that shows me the whole picture of what the priorities are here is massively important. We've created, and I'll get into that in the improvement, but collaboration has been incredibly important. I came in here and I heard nothing but awful things about purchasing and how hard and difficult it is to get things through. And that may be the case in some form or fashion, but we have instituted a monthly Monday meeting with the procurement folks such that we can talk about the priorities of the week. So this week we had Lytle Park. Monday we talked about that, hey, we're bidding on Wednesday. Is there anything else we need to know? Several of these priority projects, just so we have that collaboration and it's not just a piece of paper coming across, like everybody else here. We have a name to a face and we get priority treatment just because we care and respect those folks enough. So we're working really hard with procurement right now. Internally, communication is just as important. I've set bi-weekly meetings with other division managers and the regional managers to walk their sites or give them an hour every other week. Dave Boutel, Matt Hood, Lou Sand, walk me through what your problems are. I don't know everything. There's 150 sites in this parks department. I'm overwhelmed with how much cool stuff there is to oversee, but I need help of the folks that are on the ground every single day. And that's very, very helpful to me so far. I've had 3 of those meetings with Dave Boutel. Those are immensely collaborative and really is going to help us prioritize and show you the true picture of what needs to be done here. All of this with the goal of giving you the best information possible to make the best decisions in the right amount of time. Let's see. Yeah, the last thing I had on my list of things that I noted for improvement are project prioritization, just like you guys are talking about a CIP plan. CRC does a 6-year CIP plan. Right now, there's money in 2021, 2022, and 2023 for the infrastructure and rehabilitation funds. Those are the ones that cause everybody the most problems, right? Because it's 75 projects inside of there and none of them have a project number. So what you all will see from our stuff is a project number for all of the ones that have already been vetted and approved for construction or moving forward by the board. That will be on our tracking sheet. Just so you know, we're going to start tracking projects with a project number inside of the infrastructure and rehabilitation fund. Other projects that have a specific funding source like Lytle will be its own funding number, like you said. So in that sheet that we're building, the project tracker, which all of you will have access to, it is a truly working document to show you the funding, where we think it's coming from, what year that money should be spent, and a running total. We're trying to get to a place where, in the private side, there's several different, all of you know this, but there's several different metrics on how much work can one person do well, and I know that for consulting, I know those numbers and those metrics, but we're trying to get to that point here to very much to your point. How much work should we be able to accomplish in a day, a week, a year, effectively and accurately? So we will get to that number as well, and maybe assign a dollar number per staff member when we get to that point. Like how much can we effectively do in a year to give you that motivation that you need to say, well, we have $800 million or $80 million worth of stuff to do here. We can effectively do 4 or 5 of it a year, and we have 2. We can go ask for 2 or 3. That's exactly where I think you all want to get to. So yeah, my improvements, things that we're starting on and improving as we move forward here after 2 months. I mentioned collaboration, standing weekly meeting with purchasing, standing bi-weekly meeting with division heads. Steve has augmented that by getting division heads together bi-weekly as well. So that's a huge help to get us all in the same room and on the same page. And I've mentioned the tracking tool several times. Project documentation, I mentioned that as well. Matt DeBona has moved down to our office. I'm sure you all know of him. He's a GIS genius. It's amazing to have someone like that on the staff. He's showing me things that I don't even know about how we can give you more information at the edge of your fingertips here. We're trying to get to the point where we're tracking all the money, where it's spent inside of the city. And every project that should be on your radar or something that you should be commenting on, that is the goal of this sheet. It's a huge Excel sheet. You guys, it will link to other tools that we're using to increase our efficiency as well. But that is literally the working document meant for you to comment. It will have all the funding, the best, the latest on every single thing in there, but it will give you guys the opportunity once a month to write a question. There's 150 to 200 projects on that list. If you all have a question, I want to know about it, not necessarily always in this meeting. So that's just preferably. Yeah, not always. So that's one thing that we will have live by the July meeting. Hopefully you all will see it a little bit beforehand, just to show you that it's not going to be perfect. It's going to take into account the strategic plan that you guys have outlined today, but also it's like Steve said, it's up for discussion and we want to prioritize that. But at least it will give you the tools to know how much money you should be spending, how much we can effectively do, and give you a clear-cut goal on where we should be going, instead of having a list that has 200 projects on it, ranging from a 1 square of concrete to Lido Place. Let's see. I mentioned a little bit about geospatial improvements. Like I said, Matt DeBona is in house right now. We're doing everything we can to get 100 years worth of analog data digital. So we have plans that would blow your mind, like pencil drawings of Laurel Park and things that are just so cool to me, and having 100 years of history in Halk House. But we need to be able to share that with people quickly, not just drawings, MOUs, easements, things like that should be at our fingertips will be. As Steve mentioned, we're trying to hire 2 co-ops right now, but we're already working on with Matt a system called Cages Docs. Cages, as you probably know, is a geospatial tool that helps make maps. And I'm sure you've seen some of those and several of those along the ways. The document part of that is very interesting because it allows us to take historical plans, pair them with a geospatial tick on a map, and pull that up at any time that we want. So when someone comes to us and says, hey, who's responsible for maintaining the stairs at Eden Park? I can click on that button and know the MOU, the easements that are involved, without having to make 500 phone calls to try to figure out who knows what. So we're working on all that stuff. It won't happen overnight. We have we have 150 properties that we take care of every day. We're working through them priority one by one. We have Friendship Park, Bellevue, and those are the ones that we're already digitizing right now because we know those things are coming. So we're trying to get there. Paul, our historian, is helping us, and I'm certainly hoping that we have a couple more co-ops to help us scan and get all that stuff where it needs to go and properly archived. So if we have a fire over there, we don't lose everything we have. Let's see. That was everything I had from a diatribe standpoint of how we're doing what we're doing. The rest of what I have for you all today is just a monthly project update. We're finishing a lot of things, and we walked into a whole lot of projects that are mid-construction, I'll say that. So things that have been completed this month. Eden Park Drive admin building had some renovations done to the inside. All that is done. Just as a note for you all, we had a pre-construction meeting with the folks that are going to do the roof. That should start in about 2 weeks. Everything is ready. We're waiting on material. Once that material is certified, we can begin, and we will certainly let the staff know beforehand because there will be some disruption in here. Halk House roof repairs were complete. Alms roadway resurfacing was completed. The Fairview Park fence was repaired, and the California Woods road restoration, where it was right next to the big erosion issue, that has been repaired and completed. So those 5 projects were completed in May. Our current design focus, I'm not going to read all these to you, but I will give you the updates and highlights on what stuff that we've accomplished. Laurel Park, the Ezra Charles statue project is moving forward. We anticipate work beginning on that in July. We're working through the final steps on the change order for the electrical right now. Everything is progressing as it should. Lido Park, I mentioned earlier, we had bids received yesterday, 2 bids I know of so far. I've been in contact with purchasing. We should have an update from DEI by the end of the day to make sure they met the inclusion goals. And I should see that bid tab tomorrow. So I'll get an email out to Steve for sure when we understand and know what's happening with Lido. Tom Jones Commons that I know you all touched on last month and approved a change order for that. That change order on the purchasing side is fully executed. We've met with Bruce, who's going to do that work, and talked with staff. The seating window is best in late August, September, so that work is deferred until then, but we're gonna augment the soil. We're gonna fix everything. We've met with Tom Jones, we've met with the foundation, got everybody's plans aligned for that, and we're gonna enact those in early fall to make sure the seating has the best chance to survive. Mentioned International Friendship Park. We got some big news on that 2 days ago. I helped John Nyer a couple weeks ago write a emergency declaration continuance so that we can use Greater Cincinnati Waterworks emergency status to help repair that park. That was a big deal for us because it saves us having to go out and go through the bidding process for a consultant. Why we really wanted to get this under an emergency status, at least for the design, is because Human Nature completed that design 25 years ago. We met with those folks on site once, said, hey, we don't need to go back to the drawing board here. We're putting back pretty much what was there. What can we do to expedite this process? We're not going back to the design drawing board. They suggested a initial contract, a very small contract to assess the site, assess the damage that was done, and give us a rough order of magnitude cost for the construction to go back. Something better than me guessing, somebody with a contractor having eyes on the system to make sure everything's gonna go back the way it's supposed to. That work will be coordinated starting today. I'm gonna reach out and get those quotes out the door. Also, we're gonna get the irrigation that was severed in that spot back over to the west side, so Lou and his guys don't have to water truck that stuff all summer before it gets too hot. So both of those will be enacted first when Human Nature gives us a design proposal for the final design of the park. We're hoping to redline the original plans and do this as a design build, so we're not spending $200,000 or $300,000 on design fees when the work's already been done. So we're working through that. Chris and I are more than capable of reviewing that in step as it comes, and we will keep you up to date on how that's going. But I hope by this time next month, we at least have those consultant and irrigation contracts in place. Just a note on the funding for that, because I talked to the GCWW guys yesterday. They requested that we double address all of our invoices such that Kyle Buckley of GCWW and myself are on them. Greater Cincinnati Waterworks will be paying the bills, but they want us to administer the project, which makes a whole lot of sense. So that's where we are with IFP. The Owl's Nest Pavilion that you all have been hearing about since you've approved it in December is finally going to get underway for construction, for consulting and design concepts in July. We will, in their contract, as we've stated before, we do have some public engagement in there. So we're not just we will have some concepts that are pretty much already vetted by the community and only allow the consultant to move forward with ones that we think are viable. So you all will see an update on that potentially in the August meeting. We'll know where we are with some concepts. District 5 and Deal Road, it's one of my biggest priorities. As you all know, NIOSH bought DNR's current facility on Reading Road. We are working with KZF to do 3 rehabilitations at the same time. District 5 building, we're doing the Deal Road site adjacent to the potential biochar site, and the Centon Road rehabilitation are all under one design contract. We've already met with KZF. They have been to District 5. We had their whole discipline suite. 10 people were there, and Chris and myself walking them through that building and talking to them about the things they need to be looking at and making sure are getting done. We'll engage with Crystal and DNR and her team when the time is right to make sure all their things are being captured. We are expediting District 5 design as fast as we possibly can, such that we're trying to beat an April 2023 deadline to have those folks in their new home. If not, we may miss it by a couple months. We're already talking through some temporary plans to have them housed outside of that just as a contingency, but we're really hoping we can get it done. Snail Lot 23, I exchanged emails on a couple of days ago. There's several different facets moving on in that project right now, but as by way of update, THP has received comments at the beginning of this week on the enhancements there, and they're working through some final details on some stairs and things before we bring it back for additional comment. That's where Snail Lot 23 is. Currently in construction, but almost complete. Rapid Run Playground is almost done. The final surfacing is not there, but most of the playground equipment's been put in. All of that looks really, really good. The Rapid Run Trail is complete as far as the concrete goes. They have some seeding, erosion control issues that need to be fixed. I will address that. The Sawyer Point Pickleball improvements. The lights are all in and all of the surfacing has been done. So everything is sitting and waiting right now. It needs 30 days to cure before they're allowed to put the painted lines and things on top. So that'll happen mid-July, early to mid-July. And the Trailside Nature Center, how there was the entrance was messed up. That is, they've come out, they've demoed everything from where that needs to be repaired. They've categorized the rebar that was inside of that, and they're getting a structural engineer right now to ensure everything that's going back meets code, and then we'll move forward with that. But it's under construction. Our next project focuses, as you all very much alluded to, Inwood Park and Pavilion restoration, and looking at that holistically. There's a lot of money allocated between the sale and the budget for this year. We want to make sure we're spending that in the best way possible and bringing you all in to help make some of those decisions as necessary. So our initial goal, as I mentioned earlier, was to look at that from a stabilization standpoint. I know in my few visits to that park, there are some issues with the retaining walls, especially adjacent to the pavilion. Look at that, see how much those need to be fixed. Those were addressed as well in the Branstetter-Carroll report, but not fully. So that is one tool, but it's not the full. They did not do the engineering analysis that we will do on every single project. So just so you all know that, that's one tool that we're going to use, and it's a really good matrix. But some of their things in there are not, they don't take into account the whole picture currently. So it's a very, very good tool, but it needs some more, it needs more things to be effective. Mount Area 23, that project is one that we know is going to go this summer as far as design. That's the walking trail from the Oval all the way down to Area 23. Chris and I have walked that site. Preliminary design is underway, and we'll be working on that through the summer. Let's see, California Woods. This is a hot button issue for me. As you all saw, they allotted $500,000 in the 2023 budget for road improvements and erosion improvements that are along that road. That's in the 2023 proposed so far. I am already in contact with some folks that are trying to give me the best engineering approach to fix the 90-degree turn, which is right where that road is that we had to fix this year. There's essentially a 90-degree turn in the stream, which pounds this bank, and it's lost 4 feet in the past year, just shedding this off. And it's about 20 feet deep at this point. So I actually met on site yesterday. We're looking, I know the DNR team here internally, as well as P&D, are working towards a bigger project to do some stream energy dissipation. That's what we hope to use some of those funds for, just to keep these problems from happening again, because that's the biggest thing we need to do to ensure road stabilization, is make sure the stream itself isn't going to continue to erode. So we're working towards that with that in mind, trying to make that stream as sustainable as possible to save all the infrastructure downstream. California Woods is under consideration right now for next year. The Crone MEP repairs, that is some vent work and control work. Chris is working on that with the Crone. There's 4 or 5 smaller projects involved with this, but essentially getting this back to a place to where we have a good maintenance contract established with these folks, so we can fix the vents, fix the controls outside of the park's limited capability for that stuff. It was something that was in place a few years ago and needs to come back now. So we're working towards getting that as well. And I put Drake Park on this list because I don't know too much about it yet. And I know that it's on the priority list for next year for the budget. So we're looking into master planning that, seeing what needs to be done and what best improvements we can make with the funds that we have available. I believe that's all the updates I have. Do you all have questions for me?
Well, I just thought that's this is announced.
I apologize.
He doesn't even look worse for the wear.
I know.
He's fresh.
Joel, thank you for that. Any specific question first? I am astounded at what you've been able to do in a short period of time. And it may not have been 3 days before you had your hands around it, but I know I, for one, feel very, very thrilled that you have come in and the way that you have been able to look at this and prioritize it and say, how can we make this better? So
I appreciate the kind words. I want to say thank you to my staff as well and everyone that I've worked with, from people sitting in this room. I mean, it's not my win. It's the fact that you've got 100 people in this building that are willing and able to get me up to speed in 2 months. That's the real win here, is Chris McGee, Rocky, Craig, every single day helping me with questions and getting us to the point where we know what we don't know for once. So I appreciate the kind words. Thank you for that. But the staff has been more than 90% of that.
Regarding Smale.
Yes, ma'am.
Lot 23, and you say that you're working with the foundation
Yes, ma'am. Well, we're in
I'm just
contact. with them.
curious, have they let you know, because they've done a lot of fundraising.
Yes.
To complete that park. Have they let you know that that fundraising is completed for the initial amount that they thought the upgrades would cost?
I do not know that. I will find out for you, Commissioner. I know funds were mentioned, but I'm not sure if they've reached the ceiling that they need to enact all of those. I know that a lot of the money has been raised because several of the components of 23 have already been sold. So many of the seat walls or several of those components have already been completely sold out. So they're very close, if not 100% ready to move forward with that. But I will touch base with Jen Spicer and see where they are exactly with their money.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Couple items, Joel. First of all, I echo Jim's comments. You have established tremendous credibility with me, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of everyone here when I say that. And confidence, and I'm really excited to see us. I can feel we're gonna make progress because you're really dedicated to it. And
Thank you.
a lot of skills in management here, so excited to see your matrix. A couple things that I want to, we don't have to talk about this here today, but at some point we will and should. One is the state allocated in its capital budget, 1.2 million for Freedom Park.
Yep.
We will have to, of course, we received a presentation from Phil Castellini several months ago. We will, as a board, have to address and how we are going to lead, participate in this project in any capacity.
Yes, ma'am.
Number two, I am very optimistic that we're gonna have a few World Cup games announced for Cincinnati.
Today, right? That's what they said.
That's right. So the question will be, and we won't have to answer this immediately, but these are going to be here in 4 years. And as with any other city that's ever hosted a World Cup game, there's a tremendous collaborative effort to make our front door
Absolutely.
the best it can be. And so we definitely want, and we'll need to have parks as a premier spot at that table. So we need to start thinking about how we're going to put our best foot forward 4 years from now. And that may influence where our priorities are established in some capacity.
That's a great
So
point.
that's
Thank you.
just to see the plan.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I just think this is great. I really
Thank you.
do. It scares me. And I'm serious when I say that, because since I've been here, I've been kind of asking for this kind of thing. And I wanted to be able to go somewhere and just click and read the stats on
Yes, ma'am.
know how much we spent, know what the next step is, what the next milestone is. And what you're saying, we're gonna have that.
That's right.
I can see myself stand up.
Hey, I'll preface it by this. It's like you all have mentioned, the 2-page strategic plan that Jim has put forth as a working document. This is very much a live document. What we're going to give, it's an Excel sheet. We'll do it very similar to the sheet that you started, Jim, when I first started here, which I greatly appreciate as well. But it's that on steroids. You're gonna see every project that you've already talked about, and then underneath that and highlighted, you'll see every project that we may be doing, or we think we should be doing, or needs to be at your attention. All of those will have a couple comments at the end of it, 2 or 3 sentences that tell you where that project is, or what we think, or what the greatest intent of that project is. And then you all can comment to us, So
I
we will roll that out next
just
month.
recommend that you lock it down as read only.
We've talked about that already.
Except for those cells by which you're looking for our content.
Yes, sir. We'll have a whole board
Not the
comment.
rest down.
Limit the comment section to 2 seconds.
Exactly. Joel, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You know,
Standing ovation.
Thank you.
exactly, standing ovation. And I also want to take a chance to thank this board, because the comments that you made, we've been asking for this. Sometimes we don't make we have to make tough decisions. Sometimes we have to, as a board, take actions on things. I am so thrilled today, hearing Joel's approach to this and the fact that we have Joel sitting in that seat. I just want to thank this board for what we've done to help put the park board into the position that we are to be able to do everything that we want to do for what you're doing here, Joel. So thank you.
Thank you. This is the most fun and most stressful job I've ever had. at the same time.
But we're gonna try to emphasize that, we'll try to emphasize the client. Okay, Mr. Director, barring other,
Yes.
go ahead.
Excuse me.
Yes.
One thing that I forgot, that I have written a note to myself and overlooked, is when we talk about the priorities, as we heard today, we get a request to look at a new dog park. As we look at the priorities and the things we want to accomplish in the next year, think about how we integrate, or how we deal with these but these new ideas that come up from the community in various places that we're not anticipating. So how do we account for those, and how do we put those in with the things we've already identified as priorities?
We can do that, and that's where we're going to need your help for that reshuffle. Yes.
Steve, the floor is yours.
All righty, thank you.
Mr. Director.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate it. So I just want to kind of give a recap on my first 16 days. I don't know if that's actually a time frame.
Very well up to speed.
Yeah, so mostly just been listening and learning, trying to get out with staff out on location. I have some tours set up with the maintenance folks, similar to what Joel is doing, just to get out there on the ground with the supervisor to make sure that we're looking at our properties and making sure that we have eyes on them on a pretty regular basis. I have set up some regular staff meetings, senior staff meetings, so that we're all kind of, connecting on a somewhat regular basis so we can share our work and make sure that there's any interaction between divisions necessary for better efficiency, that we're having those conversations in advance and we're all on the same page. I guess along in those conversations as well, is just trying to listen to the staff and assess their individual needs, and not only that, but their divisional needs. And so I'm trying to sit in on each divisional sub-meeting that they have to get a feel for how those are going. One thing that I wanted to say early on, and what's been an easy observation, is though there may have been a lack of leadership in the director's position, there's no lack of leadership in this organization. Each division manager, each service crew leader is very, very capable, very, very experienced, and very passionate about what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, and has a vision for their division as well. So the leadership skills in this organization, from Jenny and Craig and Rocky and Joel, and I'll stop there so I don't miss anybody, has just been so exciting to work with. It's so refreshing. It's just so easy to get things done and work with Joel and his team, because we're already thinking along the same lines. And again, the leadership is in this organization. So as Jim mentioned earlier, you don't get to number 4 in the country just by falling out of bed. Those folks have been doing the work in absence of someone in this leadership position. So wanted to point that out. That was an easy observation in the first 16 days. I'm trying to, this week is trying to get out and look at our hot topics. I have some tours set up tomorrow with Burnett Woods and some of the dog folks who are opposed to the project. I'll be visiting Stanberry Park as well to look at some of the issues that we're having out there. I've been to Bellevue and understand a little bit of some of the challenges that we have there. Very concerning from a safety standpoint. I think we really need to look at securing that overlook. If we can secure the overlook, which is going to be a challenge, that stops all the rocks and everything else. And it's very concerning. I don't know if anybody's actually walked out on those ledges, but it's again, extremely concerning from a safety standpoint. Surprised that someone would actually go out there, and then to see the activities that are going out there is just,
At
again,
Bellevue,
yes.
there have been deaths
Yep.
on that over the years.
I can see that we really got to somehow in this new design secure that area a lot better than what we're doing right now. So staff's been working on some things as well. Tia has, I guess from the last meeting, we're concerned about how concerns come into the department and how we're responding to those. Tia has created a tracker. There's an email at cincy.parks. It's available on our website. Constituents have an opportunity to go on there, provide a comment. Tia will take that information, disseminate it to the proper division to address the concern. And then Tia will respond once we have that individual's experts response to that need and how we can address it. The hope is that we get to a point that each division manager will eventually get onto the SharePoint, look at those concerns on a daily basis, and be able to shoot back a response so that we can get our response time back to our citizens as quickly as possible. So Tia's done great work with this. She built it in about 2 days and just really was excited about the end result. We're going to see an announcement in the next week or so. The work that is happening at Sawyer Point with the pickleball courts has really put us in a position to host a national event. So Cincinnati is going to have in May of 23, the Cincinnati Pickleball Open. There will be a pro division. So if anybody wants to start sharpening up their skills now. But the really cool thing is they anticipate anywhere between 400 and 500 guests coming in the city for 5 days and staying. They've done a little study and they believe that this is about a $1.2 million impact to the city. So that partnership has really created some great energy down there. And I don't know if anybody plays pickleball, but it's a very passionate group of players. And so I met with the gentleman Gary, who is kind of spearheading that. So you'll see an announcement if you're a pickleball follower that Cincinnati will be hosting this event in 2023. Lou and Jenny have already had initial conversations. We're just kind of now working through what that agreement will look like from a revenue share or a rental, depending on what's most advantageous to the department and the city. I have updates from the CEV team, Rocky's team. Sorry, I'm going to have to read some of this. I'm not as familiar with it, but obviously we're coming off the Butterfly Show, which is going to close on June 19th. But they're also preparing for their next exhibit, which will be the Science of Color featuring Prismatica. That'll run from July 2nd through October 15th. A lot of press about that. I'm really anxious to see that. I understand it works off of prisms, lights off from prisms, so very interesting. And that's going to tie in with Blink, the overall city objective. And so we're trying to figure out if there's some synergy there and a way to tie in our project, our show with that. So really excited about what his team can put together there. Another item was Cincinnati Hikes. They had a Trail Fest. Jim, I think you actually showed up in some pictures. That took place on June 4th. And that's really just an event that really educates and provides opportunities to ways to recreate responsibilities in our trailways. And so great educational tool that Rocky and his team were part of. Our green team started this past week. That's an 8-week program. We have 60 kids joining us for the summer. They're broken up into 10 different teams spread out over 5 different locations. There are 2 supervisors with each 10-person team. I haven't had a chance to check in on that from the park side, but on the recreation side, that was one of the favorite programs that we ran. The kids really get something out of this. And at the end of the day, we've got 60 kids, and if we can get 2 or 3 park professionals out of that at the end of the day, we'll be happy. And so it really exposes them to sometimes their first job opportunity, but really gets them interworking with the department and interworking with each other, which are essential job skills that they need at that point in their life. So a great program. If you can get out there and or you want to get out there and see what they're doing, just let me know and we'll provide you information on where they're at and the work they're performing that particular day. But again, we'd love to have you out there. I know Crystal will as well. Just some other little things. Each month or bi-weekly, depending on the need, there is a city managers meeting and all directors come together. On July 7th, Crystal will be providing a report on an assessment on the tree canopy program. So I think that's really good because sometimes other departments are kind of working on these programs and you may not think that that's something that affects your department. But sometimes when you hear those presentations, you realize, wait a minute, I've got something going on there. Don't dig up that road yet. We're doing this. And so that coordination is really good and really proud of Crystal and preparedness that she's done already to provide that under a pretty somewhat friendly environment. It can be tough at times too, but just a great way to highlight some of the work that we're doing. I've suggested to some of you on our 101 that I want to take a look and make some suggestions on our agenda and really try to get the staff more involved and let you know what's going on from a program highlight and a team highlight perspective. There's some really cool things going on out there that you really should know about. Along those lines, we're hoping to put out our first internal communication on Friday. It'll be centered around what happens in this meeting. We want staff to know that what you all are doing and what everybody else is doing as well. So there'll be a side to it that's very informational. What happens in this meeting is obviously very important. We want them to know about that, but there'll be a lighter side as well. What's happening with your coworkers out there in the field, whether it's an anniversary of your 25 years, whether the birth of your child, whatever it might be. We've asked them to just provide some information that you think would be valuable or informational that you think would be interesting for you to know. So again, that'll be work in progress, but hopefully our first publication, Rocky, if I'm not putting you on the spot, will be tomorrow. And it'll be something that we're really going to try to build on to increase that communication, not only at the internal level with our staff, but also that's the goal of those senior staff meetings, is to really make that connection. The whole thing, the theme of what we're trying to do, what I'm trying to do when I'm here, is look at it from the perspective of a new director coming in. What would I want to know? How easy would I want to get the information like Joel is creating, and really provide an environment for success on day one so that they can focus on the objectives of the board. And again, not worry about the day-to-day operations of this agency, because the leadership skills, the skill set and experience out there is just, it's overwhelming. It's really, really great to see. And I can't thank you enough for the opportunity to work with such a great profession. So thank you. That's all I have.
I have just one question, safety. We've talked about the one issue with the rocks and walls. But do you feel that the police are capable of keeping our parks safe? Has that been addressed at all? Because one of our applicants brought up that issue.
It's a huge internal conversation. There are concerns about not only the safety, but also the condition of our assets and some of the activities that we're seeing in our parks that don't really support, the healthy presentation of our assets. And so, yes, it's a hot topic internally. I know that there are conversations going on about the safety in our park and how CPD can be more engaged. I met with the city manager yesterday, and that was one of the items on my list was, can we look at how this is being done? Is there opportunities for officers that perhaps may be on light duty, or is there other opportunities to get more presence in our parks? Because that seems to work. Just throwing out the ideas to him, just to kind of get him thinking along the lines that we do need a little bit more support and we need a little bit more visibility. I will say that staff has said, and Jenny's been very instrumental in this, when we do have tough items going on or issues going on, we do get a good response, but it has a tendency to be inconsistent. And so we want to try to work with CPD and our other partners out there that are operating the same type of spaces. How can we work more together to make sure we have a little bit more presence out there? And is there key times that we can identify where that presence would really go a long way, as opposed to softer times what may not be necessary? So yes, there is a lot of conversation around that internally, and then we do hear constituents as well.
What is the area in which we have a police report? Is that?
I guess my other question would be, are you addressing perhaps the need for
Third party.
third party?
I brought that up, and there have been some conversations, and there's some reservation at this point. So I want to kind of dig a little deeper to find out what those reservations are and how valid they are. But third party can go a long way. We've had some experience with that in the past. That presence can, perturb that activity for a little bit. But it's that constant pressure or constant appearance on site that really goes a long way. Constant presence, I should say. My apologies.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, sorry for talking so fast, a little nervous.
No, absolutely not.
Trying to cover as much as we can. And if that's too much, just let me know. If it's not things that you want to
Steve,
know.
it's incredible that you've been able, as we said, with Joel, to step in and what you've been able to assimilate, what you've been able to put your arms around already. So thank you very much.
It's been fun, and I'm again setting up meetings with the budget director, which I've already met with, to make sure that I'm not cutting in line, but I am trying to get to the front of the line should any additional funds trickle down to the departments.
Thank you for that. Okay, well, I'm going to open it now for just open commissioner discussion, comments. Anybody there?
Jim, I would give a brief update on the director search.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so as everyone could see from our minutes, we've had a lot of meetings. There have been a lot of hours invested in the initial candidate interviews. We've interviewed 8. The application remains open, and the selection committee has determined that it will remain open until we fill the role. We've been very excited about these candidate interviews. Again, we've spent a lot of time. We've spent exactly 1 hour with each of the 8 candidates initially. We are continuing conversations with many of those candidates over the next couple of weeks. The goal will be that we can arrive at 2 or 3 candidates that we bring in for another formal round of interviews. And again, I think we're very optimistic that within this group of 8, we likely have a very strong next director. So that's really the update. I hope that we, by the end of July, will be in a position where we'll be announcing the next permanent director.
I just want to echo all of you said about the staff. Guys are unbelievable. The effort, professional attitude, energy, pride, it really does come through so well. So, thank you for bringing us into the 21st century.
Yes.
I think we skipped a century.
Yeah, we've been waiting a while for some of this stuff, and it's nice to see you show up.
I'd like to add a couple things, and again, just representing that Cincinnati parks are for the community. And when there's celebrations in the community, people like to use Cincinnati parks. So there's a couple things I want to mention. The Juneteenth celebration, it's taking place this weekend. It's taking place in Eden Park, right down the street here. So I would thank staff for making Eden Park the welcoming park, and encourage everybody to enjoy a park setting for that celebration. I see, as I'm sitting here, I see the Juneteenth flag flying at the park staff, so thank you for doing that. I also want to say that June is also Pride Month, and I would like to make a motion that the park board join with the city of Cincinnati and recognize that June is Pride Month in the city of Cincinnati and part of the Pride in Cincinnati parks. And I would like to move that we also add on that flag staff there, besides the Juneteenth flag, that we raise the Pride flag, as has been done at City Hall, that we raise the Pride flag at the parks headquarters here. I'd like to make that as an official motion. So I have made a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. I just want to say that all of our staff, whether we are celebrating anything in Cincinnati, we have a diversity in our staff, and I'm thankful for that. And I would encourage staff, and I know Derek will help us in that process, that we, as far as communication with staff, we also celebrate staff. We celebrate, whether we're celebrating Juneteenth, whether we're celebrating Pride, that we are an inclusive, and we appreciate everybody that uses our parks, and especially proud of our staff for the contributions they make to Cincinnati.
And I probably should have mentioned that it is now an official holiday in the city of Cincinnati.
Yes.
So staff will be off. We are asking for volunteers to come in. We do anticipate there'll still be some work to do. We've had some volunteers already step up. So really good news from the staff of the city of Cincinnati as well.
Perfect.
Great.
Thank you. Anybody?
I'd like to echo your comments and all of the comments commending the staff, because you guys have been outstanding and we really appreciate it. You just stepped up in a time when we really needed that, and you have not failed, and that is wonderful. Couple of things. Rocky on the social media, like I'm up late at night, kind of just, so Joe, you're gonna keep me up even later. But I just saw a video, and I won't remember the name, but I saw a video highlighting the Western region. Yes, yeah. Angela Carlos. Yes, I thought that was excellent. And it was done with an interviewer from a local radio station. The reason I think that's significant is that I hear a lot about where is the diversity in parks. And that was a very nice highlight using a Black radio station. So I hope that gets a lot of play, I hope that gets a lot of attention, because it was a very well done thing. The other one is a suggestion of something to consider. A lot of the things that are happening in our neighborhood parks, people don't always hear about them. I think there may be an opportunity for when you're putting those things together that show up on social media to forward that to the community council, because many of them have newsletters or websites that they can just pull that and drop it on, so that people in the neighborhoods know that there are activities that are planned for them in our various parks. So just promoting the things we're already doing, so people know when we start to address this impression that we're not doing some things. And I think part of it is because people don't know all that we're doing. So things you're already doing, just dropping them in a different place. So thank you very much for that.
Okay, thanks for the feedback. That's been part of our very intentional strategy to move away from some of the old media that was happening a lot of when I got here, a lot of print, and just sort of old school techniques and bringing it into the 21st century, where we're really doing some very sophisticated micro-targeting through our digital means, and have some strategic partnerships with local radio stations. Because I agree that's sort of, we're able to reach many audiences through our broad stuff, but there's some more niche audiences we want to make sure we're getting, and that's a collaboration.
Yeah.
In terms of the local notification, that's great feedback. There's so much going on in our parks through the summer. We only have so much bandwidth to blast stuff to everybody.
Right.
That we've gotten on next door, and we can be more intentional about making sure that something in a particular park we're tagging them on next door. I think that's a great suggestion about the councils. We tend to communicate with them when it's either something we want them to buy, or something they want to sign up for, like some type of registration, something like that. Just general events. That's good feedback.
Anybody?
I just wanted to wish Jenny a good vacation.
Oh, yeah.
She didn't hear it. Oh, she's frozen.
She's frozen. There she is.
Well, I want to thank everybody for this meeting. There's a lot of positive things happening in Cincinnati Parks. And as we've said, the great staff that we have, the great relationships that we have, the great volunteers that we have. So it's always good to come and celebrate. And I think we had an excellent meeting today. Our next meeting is scheduled for July 21. And we will have some special meetings in between to continue our search for a permanent director, and those will be posted. So with nothing else before us, I'm going to adjourn our meeting.